Hello, friends, and welcome to Adventures in Pixieland. My name's Amy, and I'm an ordained minister. And we're in Bible study, okay? We are in the NIV, and we will be through 2025. In this video, we are in Leviticus chapter 14. Now, I know I'm like, you're like, what's so funny? I had tried to start recording this video before and I couldn't because I had just to release this like burst of sort of uncomfortable or odd like laughter because of what they're describing here. And my brain, it just keeps going like, this poor bird. This poor bird. So I'm just going to cleansing of infectious skin diseases. Okay. The Lord said to Moses, these are the regulations for the diseased person at the time of his ceremonial cleansing when he is brought to the priest. The priest is to go outside the camp and examine him. If the person has been healed of his infectious skin diseases, which they have a footnote of it, leprosy is what's traditionally listed, but in this case, leprosy is just, you could have a rash, you could have a pimple, and they would call it leprosy. Like any of it would be leprosy. The priest shall order that 2 live clean birds, and that's going to be like in their regulations of what's considered clean or unclean, and basically no meat-eating birds of any kind, even if it's fish. And some cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and a hyssop be brought for the one to be cleansed. Then the priest shall order that one of the birds be killed over a freshwater clay pot. He is then to take the live bird and dip it. Dip the live bird in the blood and water of the dead bird. I don't know how they're managing that. First in my brain is like, this poor bird. And then secondly, birds are not really known for holding still when you're trying to handle them. They do not want to be handled. Like they make that pretty clear. And for me, I'm like, that's good. I'm not going to do that. You stay over there, live wild bird outside. I have a plethora of them in my yard, and I even have plant and put up things to support them and everything because I love them dearly out there and I don't want to touch them. So this is not a thing I'd want to do. I'm glad that this is not an ordinance. For me in my life anyway, he is then to take the live bird and dip it together with the cedar wood and the scarlet yarn and the hyssop and into the blood of the bird that was killed over the fresh water. 7 times he shall sprinkle the one to be cleansed of the infectious diseases and pronounce him clean. Then he is to release the live bird in an open field. So my brain is more like, can you just like hold the live bird in like one hand and then like dip the hyssop in the cedar, because the scarlet yarn, tying them together like in there, like, do we have to like dip? Like, is the bird tied to the stick? Is that why the stick? I mean, I have questions. And then you release the bird. So can you imagine what this bird's reaction is to this? Because what the heck's going on here? Now I know that they don't have that higher level thought that we know of anyway. Okay, because that's our presumption based on the size of their brain. In actuality, I have no idea what goes on in the brain of a bird, or in a bird brain. That's often true of when somebody is, like being mean and using that insult for anybody, actually. The person to be cleansed must wash his clothes. Shave off all his hair, okay, and bathe with water. That's a really good plan. Then he will be ceremonially clean. After this, he may come into camp, but he must stay outside his tent for 7 days. Like, okay. So sleep elsewhere? On or just outside? exposed to the elements for 7 days. On the 7th day, he must shave off all his hair. He must shave his head, his beard, his eyebrows, and the rest of his hair. He must wash his clothes and bathe himself with water, and then he will be clean. On the 8th day, he must bring 2 male lambs and 1 ewe lamb, a year old, each without defect, along with 3/10 of an ephah, or that is, they're going to tell us what the equivalent of 6 quarts, or about 6.5 liters, of fine flour mixed with oil for grain offering, and 1 log, that is probably about 2/3 of a pint, or 0.3 liter, of a liter of oil. The priest who pronounces him clean shall present both to the priest who pronounces him clean shall present both the one to be cleansed and his offering before the Lord at the tent of meeting. Okay. Then the priest is to take 1 of the male lambs and offer it as a guilt offering along with the log of oil. He shall wave them before the Lord as a wave offering. He is to slaughter the lamb in the holy place where the sin offering and burnt offering are slaughtered. Then the sin offering, the guilt offering belongs to the priest. Like the sin offering, the guilt offering belongs to the priest. It is most holy. The priest is to take some of the blood of the guilt offering and put it on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, which was necessary for the ordination process for them. The priest shall then take some of the log of oil, pour it in the palm of his own left hand, dip his right forefinger in the oil in his palm, and then his finger sprinkle some of it before the Lord 7 times. And then the priest is to put some of the oil remaining in his palm on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, on the top of the blood of the guilt offering. The rest of the oil in the palm of the priest shall be put on the head of the one to be cleansed, and make atonement for him before the Lord. Okay. Then the priest is to sacrifice the sin offering and make atonement for the one to be cleansed from his uncleanness. After that, the priest shall slaughter the burnt offering and offer it up on the altar together with the grain offering and make atonement for him, and he will be clean. If, however, he is poor and cannot afford these, he must take 1 male lamb as a guilt offering to be waved to make atonement for him, together with a 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil for the grain offering, a log of oil, and 2 doves or 2 young pigeons, which he can afford. Which he can afford. They're just determining that. 1 for a sin offering, and then the other for a burnt offering. On the 8th day, he must present them he must bring them for his cleansing to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest is to take the lamb for a guilt offering, together with the log of oil, and wave them before the Lord as an offering. He shall slaughter the lamb for the guilt offering, and take some of its blood, and put it on the lobe and the ear of the right, of the one to be cleansed, and the thumb of the right hand, and the big toe of the right foot, just like he would have before. The priest is to pour some of the oil into the palm of his own left hand, and with his right forefinger sprinkle some on the oil of his palm 7 times before the Lord. Put some oil in the palm to put it in the places of the blood of the guilt offering, on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. The rest of the oil in his palm shall be put on the head of one to be cleansed, to make atonement for him before the Lord. Yes, because, they shave their head all like bald, so it's actually really good for the skin itself, adding the moisture. Like it's, it is oil. I know it's like olive oil, and we think of that these days as just for cooking. But olive oil used for medicinal purposes, you could put it on your skin. It's just a matter of how much you use and making sure you have it like really purified kind of oil. And that's the kind of oil that they would be, they start coming up with like a temple quality oil. So at this point, though, it's what they're pressing. So it's definitely fresh. And it definitely does not have any of the preservatives or any of the rest of the stuff that we're worried about. So then the rest goes on in his head, right? Then he shall sacrifice the doves or the young pigeons, which the person can afford. One, be the Septuagina and the Syriac, such as the person can afford, comma, one, like whatever they can afford. One as a sin offering, the other as a burnt offering, together with the grain offering. In this way the priest shall make atonement before the Lord on the behalf of the one cleansed. These are the regulations for anyone who has an infectious skin disease and who cannot afford the regular offerings for his cleansing. So the cleansing from mildew. Verse 33. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, when you enter the land of Canaan, which I am giving you as your possession, and I put a spreading mildew in a house in that land, the owner of the house must go and tell the priest, I have seen something that looks like mildew in my house. I'm sorry, my voice did not want to say that because I will not have something that looks like mildew in my house. Thank you. Like, I don't want to put that energy here. That's, I have a very specific cleaning process because I don't want to deal with mildew or any of the rest of that kind of stuff. The priest is to order the house to be emptied before he goes in to examine the mildew, so that nothing in the house will be pronounced unclean. After this, the priest is to go in and inspect the house. He is to examine the mildew on the walls, and if it has a greenish or reddish depressions that appear to be deeper than the surface of the wall. So, yeah, okay. So, growth. I would say they should add black to that, but okay. But that's really, mildew. Yeah. The priest shall go out to the doorway of the house and close it up for 7 days. On the seventh day, the priest shall return and inspect the house. If the mildew is spread on the walls, he is to order that the contaminated stones be torn out and thrown into an unclean place outside of town. He must have the walls inside of the house scraped, and the material that was scraped off dumped into the unclean place outside of town. Then they are to take other stones to replace these and take new clay and plaster the house. So remove it, but replace it. You can't just leave it open. If the mildew reappears in the house after the stones have been torn out and the house is scraped and plastered, the priest is to go and examine it, and if the mildew has spread in the house, it is a destructive mildew. The house is unclean. It must be torn down. Its stones, timbers, and all the plaster, and taken out of town to an unclean place. So, building inspector. Okay, well now we're getting more into where I would be more comfortable. Not really saying I should be a building inspector in of itself, but at least I've been in the industry and I have an idea of what's supposed to be going on there. Even if it's not a perfect understanding, I certainly can be like, that ain't right. What is that? I don't think that. Let me go check to make sure that's code. Like, I'm more in that. If mildew reappears in a house after the stones have been torn, okay, we got to there. It must be torn down and taken to the uncompleted place. Okay, right, verse 46. Anyone who goes into the house while it is closed up will be unclean till evening. Anyone who sleeps or eats in the house must wash his clothes. That's good. Mildew is a good plan for that. But if the priest comes to examine it and the mildew is not spread after the house has been plastered, he shall pronounce the house clean because the mildew is gone. To purify the house, he is to take 2 birds and some cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and a hyssop. He shall kill one of the birds over fresh water in a clay pot. Then he is to take the cedar wood, the hyssop, and the scarlet yarn, and the live bird. Dip them into the blood of the dead bird and the fresh water, and sprinkle the house 7 times. He shall purify the house with the bird's blood, the fresh water, and the live bird, the cedar wood, and the hyssop, and the scarlet yarn. Then he is to release the live bird in an open field outside the town. In this way, he will make atonement for the house, and it will be clean. So again with the bird. Wow. These are the regulations for any infectious skin disease, for an itch, for mildew in clothing or in a house, and for a swelling, a rash, or a bright spot, to determine when something is clean or unclean. These are the regulations for infectious skin diseases and mildew. Wow. Isn't that something? So glad that we don't do that anymore. It's poor birds.